Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and Dr. Brent Fessler is back with me. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Joel. It's good to be back.
As you, let's just jump right into it. As you're out in the marketplace, you've consulted with clients with as little as 10 employees and as 700 or whatever. Mm-hmm. What are you finding that those, yes, you deal with and work with the CEOs and the C-suite, obviously, but as you dive down into the organization, what is that mid-level manager, whether that be a director, manager, supervisor, but kind of those people in the middle, what are they most hungry for? What are they looking for as they're trying to aspire in their own leadership?
Yeah. Well, I think probably one of the most common things is people get promoted into leadership for the first time, not because they were necessarily great leaders, but because they were good technically at a job. And as senior supervisors are like, man, I love how well that person performs. If we put them in charge of the team, everybody else is going to rise up and be just like that person. And that's not great logic. I can understand the logic, but it doesn't actually play out that way usually. Mm-hmm. Because the skill set in performing technically in a particular position or job on a team is not the same as being a leader. And so people who get thrown into a leadership role or invited into, and maybe even having aspired to become a leader, they feel like that's the important next step up is to become a leader, become a manager, get into management. And most companies, that's the only path up is to get into management. So unless you just want to stay where you're at and maybe not make enough money for the rest of your life, you have to switch over into some leadership or some management at some point. And that's especially true in small, medium companies. Larger companies may have a longer technical track. And so whether or not they got thrown into it or chose to be in a leadership position, I think getting overwhelmed with this new skill of leadership is like, oh, wow, I was really good with this bucket of stuff and tools, and now I don't have all the tools that I need. I don't have the skills. I don't have the tricks that I had maybe in doing my job for the last few years, and now I need to learn a whole new set. So I think they're hungry for just becoming experts in it and getting better at it. Yeah.
Where do aspiring leaders tend to struggle the most? Like in what competencies or in what, like is probably not in the technical side, it's probably people side, but inside the people element, is it communication? Is it vision casting? Which could be arguably part of communication? But like, are you seeing any themes as you're interacting with folks? The theme is it's different in every individual, so when I come in and we do leader coaching for especially mid-level, entry-level leaders. We'll do an assessment that helps us see what is the most important piece for them to start focusing on at first. And so it's a pretty long kind of inventory that has both self and 360 responses in there. So you get to have your own perspective, especially in that values space. This is what I enjoy doing. This is what I like. And those things only come from the inside of the person. But then you have the observations from people who have been experiencing them. And a good 360 is going to be a senior supervisor, some peers, and then the people that are being led by the individual. And it's interesting. You'll see different themes come out. And for example, you may see in the communication space, like you mentioned, they may be communicating really well with supervisors or with peers, but not with their subordinates. And so I think there's a lot of information to take from that, because it really does no good to shove somebody necessarily into a particular protocol or program that they don't need at first. So it's much better to try to find some of the most important things where the opportunities for growth are, because I've come into plenty of situations where it's really close to blowing up. And so there's
The good news is there's some low-hanging fruit because, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't get into management and leadership because they were great managers or leaders. It's because they were good at something else. So sometimes it's just like this nugget or just an aha in the first session. I know for one individual, they were just stretched so thin. They felt like they were stretched so thin as a manager, and they're about to just break, and so double clicking into that, where is the chaos coming from, or where's the stress coming from? And for that individual, by the way they were talking, here's my issues right now, and it's solving all of their people's problems is the thing that came from that. And that didn't necessarily come up in the 360 assessment. This was more, hey, where's this fire coming from, the stress? And I said, do you think it's your most important job to fix your team's problems? And she said, yes, that's my job. Effectively, I'm supposed to be the smartest one. I'm supposed to get all these problems out of the way so they can kind of go do their job. And I was like, wow, you're going to burn out doing that. That's not what a leader's job is to do. It's not my job to fix all your problems for you. And so it's not. It's like, no, you're supposed to develop your people so that they don't have this problem again, right? Or that they can solve the problem on their own. Like, that's what a great leader does. And for that individual, bringing their leadership identity into more like being a parent. It's like, what's your job as a parent? Is it to solve your kids' problems? It's like, no. At some point, I want them to grow up, be adults, be a great parent, be a great spouse, and so it's my job to develop them. And so it was just almost a switch that like, it's not my job to solve their problems. It's my job to grow and develop them and help, maybe remove barriers and things like that. Mm-hmm. But that was like a switch. So it didn't take 6 months to go and read a bunch of books. It was just a mindset switch. And so, but that's not with everybody, right? But that was the most important thing for that particular manager. But to that point, some of the topics that we can talk about, there are some essential principles, and you'll see this in a lot of leadership development. In fact, we're developing a leader development program. It's a 10-module program, and so in that program, it hits the essentials, and the first module in that is understanding what leadership is, understanding what management is. Mm-hmm. Kotter's famous for talking about the difference between leadership and management. And so if I'm now got this new role as being a leader, I should become an expert in what leadership is and not just trudge away and blindly, just keep, making mistakes. If I'm supposed to be a mechanic on an engine, I need to go and learn everything I can about my tools, about that engine, and it'll really help me if I know why engines work the way they do. Maybe I'm not going to be an engineer, but I need to understand a little bit about the physics behind the thing, because that's going to help me be better at it. And so I think that's probably the first step for any mid-level leader, is start to create a hunger and a desire for leadership, become an expert in leadership. Because the more you do that, the better leader you're going to be.
What would you say the biggest difference, you talked about your first module that you're developing, is exploring this idea of leadership is not management, management is not leadership. Uh-huh. So in your experience or in your research, what's the biggest difference? And then maybe what's the similarities? But talk about that.
Yeah, there's a few, and there's going to be varying ideas of some of those differences, but some of the differences are management's going to tend to be very just business outcomes. So I've got a scorecard, I've got to pursue that thing, and it's my job to win this thing. I've got processes. So you think of management, there's a lot of containment in that management. Leader is going to tend to be more people-oriented, a little bit more visionary, a little more big picture. And so often the way those two words are used, that's some of the difference between that. A leader is going to be more strategic thinking, and a manager may be more tactical, if those two words make sense, which may just be scope and scale is the difference between some of those things. And so I think some people can be only managers, and just doing the thing. It's my job to follow process. It's my job to be the responsible person. It's not necessarily my job to have vision and to go new places or to solve new problems or to come up with new ideas and things. So leaders, I've heard it said before, one of the best definitions of leadership is moving a group from here to there. And hopefully there is better than here. And so I think leadership has a bit more people, more scope to it. Manager has a little bit more tactical process, business outcomes. So there's a little bit more technical side in general. Yeah.
So a lot of leaders, people in leadership positions, are technically competent. Usually, that's why they get promoted. Do the most leaders that you interview, do they struggle with letting that technical competence go because maybe they find their identity in that, or that's what got them here, or is it they're just not comfortable with the people side of the equation, or is maybe it's both? I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen both. I've seen people. It's definitely not the common theme to always have new leaders just register high on technical side and low on the people side. There's definitely some managers and supervisors. They were maybe pulled out of the team because they were people oriented. Maybe the whole team performed okay, but they pulled the most people oriented person there. Or hey, you couldn't do the technical side, but I see you're really great with people. And so I've had both where a leader is very people oriented but not very technical oriented. But that's what some of the assessments are there to tell you. Do your followers trust you as a person? Do they trust your problem solving skills? Do they trust your technical skills, or do they feel like they've got more technical ability, which is fine. Actually, that's okay. We've heard it said, great leaders don't just surround themselves with people who are less than they are. A great leader is going to find people who are better than they are at these things. So being a leader doesn't mean that you're better than everybody else in those things. So it's okay to not have as much technical skill, but you have to be able to integrate it well. So you have to be able to get feedback from folks on that. But so having the people skills, having the technical skills, the task-oriented skills, the problem-solving skills. In my experience with dozens and dozens of supervisors, I really couldn't tell you. They all tend to be deficient in this and have a lot of this. It all depends on their path into leadership.
You're known for many good and wonderful things. One of those being you've spent a lot of years asking executives, would you rather have a person with character or a person with skill?
Yep.
Right. So along those same lines in this conversation, what have you seen, or either based on your own experiences or in talking with execs, business owners and so on, would they rather have somebody with people skills or somebody with technical skills?
Well, yeah, I think it's probably which one's harder to develop. So they'll tend to try to take the person who has the thing that's harder to develop because they don't know how to develop that in somebody else. And will develop the easier things in you. So that may depend on the senior leaders, what they're most comfortable in developing. And so if the senior leaders are more comfortable with the people side of things, they say, I need somebody with some technical skill and I'll teach you the people side. On the other hand, if you've got leaders that are, very technical oriented, they built the business because they were smart, and figured out all the technical problems. They may tend to find somebody with the people skills already because I don't know how to develop that in you. So I think that may depend, because I see that. I see sometimes themes of the leaders selected in the middle management layer do vary by what the senior leadership of that organization, what their particular tendencies and style may be. But to that point,
I think the people side tends to be the harder one to develop, because I would say at least one reason for that is a lot of the people skills depend on authenticity and genuineness. Technical, I just got to do the steps, right? And if I do the steps, I don't have to be authentic about it. It's just, I follow the rules and something happens. Doesn't matter if somebody was offended or if somebody believed me or not. And there's just kind of a little bit more predictability with that. But on the people side, you may follow the steps. Okay, I'm supposed to compliment you before I give you a correction, right? And that compliment comes out as not very genuine. That type of genuineness and authenticity takes a lot of time to develop, but it can be developed. And at least if somebody's willing to do it. And so anyways, all of that said, while it varies on the senior leadership, whether they're looking for somebody with the people skills first and teach them the technical, looking for technical and teach them the people, depends on them. People skills in general are a little bit harder because they're a little bit riskier. You don't necessarily see the feedback right away. There's a more depth to the people skills. Generally goes deeper than the surface, just on the surface, and so it takes a lot of time sometimes to develop great people skills.
I've heard over the years people will say the people with better people skills are going to make more money, be more successful. Do you think that's anecdotal? Do you think there's data that would support that?
I would have to go find the study. My gut and things that I've seen, absolutely. People, I was just hearing somebody talk last week. The people who tend to get the job are the people who are liked the most. So if you get an interview, people like you, they're going to tend to give you the job. Unless there's just a really established process and a scoring process for things. People are going to tend to hire people that they like more than just some of the objective things. And so I think promotions happen that way. I think it's something important for leaders to be aware of. Just because we like somebody doesn't mean that somebody's subordinates are going to like them. There's likability, but then there's also trust to go with things. And so I think it takes time to see the trust. You can like somebody almost instantly, but it takes some time to really see the trust. So I think not getting in a hurry to put somebody in a leadership role, find ways to test out the trust. I think one of the things as I study leadership and try to grow and develop others, and especially the work in character, is understanding that there's some layers and depth to an individual, and that's true in great leaders. So you can't just look at what are the behaviors of a great leader. Because I think, you can look at somebody like Adolf Hitler, and you can look at some great practices and really powerful and effective practices and behaviors that can make an effective leader. I guess I should say effective leader, not necessarily a great one, because he was very effective at moving a lot of people a long distance, theory-wise, belief-wise, belief systems, people's emotions, they were moved so far by his leadership. But we have to go beyond that. He wasn't a great leader because his values were very out of whack. His belief system was messed up. And some of the very authoritative parts of that. Yeah, a lot of people followed him, but they didn't necessarily want to, right? They followed because of survival. And
at some point it became fear-based.
Exactly. It started with hope, right? It was interesting. It started with hope. We've been, we don't want to be the low country, the poor country, the serving everybody else. We should be something better. So it started off with that hope, but then it quickly turned into something very, very fear-oriented.
So I think, if when it comes to a senior leader picking junior leaders and middle management and those types of folks, I think we need to take our time, but we need to be very systematic about it. What's important to me? What's important in the leadership in this culture, in this organization, and figure out how to rate people even. And okay, maybe they're great with technical skill, not so great with people skill. And so ideally you've got some runway time. You've identified maybe a great up and coming individual that you can put into a leadership role, and you can start setting a plan for them, growth and development plan for them. That's one of the things that great leaders do, is develop their people. But if we're stuck in fire mode as a leader, we're going to have a hard time taking the resource to develop somebody in that. But yeah, I think hiring somebody, not just because I like them and I can get along with them and they'll tell me what I want to hear. I think the senior leadership really need to be humble and courageous in selecting leaders that come up and take some time, grow and develop them. A new client, they're looking years out for this individual to become an executive, and so they've built a 3-year plan, growth and development plan, that we're helping implement with them. That's great. It doesn't happen a lot. Somebody's saying, I want to invest in you for a few years, instead of just, you figure it out. I think you're my guy, or I think you're my gal. And because, and this is a difference where somebody may be the right person for the job, but they may not be ready. They still need growth and development. And so as senior leaders, we need to own that. If I can't grow and develop them myself, I should find a way to grow and develop them. Because if I can't do that, I'm stuck with, now I've got to go hire somebody who's got what I've got. I'm probably going to have to end up paying a whole lot more. And the risk, right? We hire somebody that we think has it, and then it turns out they didn't quite fit. And that was a costly thing, right? That happens often. I've seen organizations where, maybe healthy on the front line, maybe a lot of stability and the senior leadership, but just a lot of turnover in that middle manager layer. Because, there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but one of those reasons could be I'm not actually growing and developing leaders, people to become leaders and sit in this space of leadership. And my only option, instead of growing people into that, is to go and find and hire somebody. And then they're less likely to fit with everything. They didn't earn their spot there. They didn't earn their power as a leader. So, I think senior leaders, I need to get good at developing people into that.
When I got out of college, I went to work for a Fortune 500 company, and they seemed to be actively looking for future leaders. Even fresh out of college, they were hiring people, fast track, type younger people that they saw as having leadership potential. I didn't grow up in the military, so I haven't had personal experience, but it would seem like military is good about looking for those future leaders and giving them opportunities to be promoted and so on. Has that been your experience or your exposure, that the better companies have this kind of intentionality about identifying? Now, not all those people that were in the fast track program and coming out of college ultimately became good leaders. So they didn't have 100% batting average,
right,
but they were at least trying.
Right.
Is that a practice you see common among successful companies? And if so, why aren't the rest of us doing that? And what are some of the barriers to that?
Well, there's risk involved in investing in people. Like you say, you're not going to always get a return out of investing in people. And so sometimes that risk, if we're myopic or short-sighted or just, can't look out past and say, I'm going to risk this person might leave in the next couple years after I've invested in them, maybe sent them to training, something to a course. And so that keeps me from doing that investment. But it means when I really need this leader in 2 years, it means I don't have anybody inside. I've got my only option is to go and hire somebody. And so I think it takes courage, it takes some foresight. When you've done it a few times, though, you have what I would call faith or hope. Once you've tried something out and it worked, you're like, okay, I can do that again. I can take that risk and do that again. Or if I've seen it happen. And so I think one of the things you do see in large companies, they don't really, yes, they get large by acquisition, but the companies that grow to be a large organization, they didn't grow that way just because they had a great product figured out, usually. They grew because they recognized, and it was a core pillar of the organization, that our people need to, our people are the foundation for our great organization. And so that means, one, we're going to hire great people with great potential, but we also have to do our part and invest and develop in there. And, that also means, though, that you've got to set aside budget for that. You've got to plan. You've got to say, we need to make enough money so that we can invest in our people for tomorrow. So there's this longer vision. There's this longer view. It's honestly, it's hard to do in small companies, small businesses. There's generally less margin. When you don't have 4 people deep on a particular position and you need to send somebody off to training, man, it can shut the whole business down, right? So it's one of the really challenging things for small businesses to do. It's one of the things that we're putting into consideration as we do leadership development and training programs for small businesses. You can't afford to send somebody off for a week. A lot of the large organizations, we're sending you for a week somewhere, and you're going to go immerse in this course. It's a fantastic experience, right? But small businesses generally can't afford to be part with one of their key. Everybody on the team is key.
25% of their staff is gone for a week.
Yeah. So that's one of the hard things. So when you're in small business, it puts some added pressure and stress to grow and develop your people and yourself. But it is one of those necessary things. We have to figure out how to get rhythms in there and to grow and develop our folks, and to have to try to build that into the business somehow.
Final question for this episode. Can people skills be taught?
Yes, absolutely, they can be taught. Some evidence of that. I tend to be very task-oriented, and I'm still that way, but I'm aware of it a little bit more. But even then, you'll catch me. We work in the same building. We work a lot together. And I'll be halfway down the hall, and I'll hear you out of the back, "Good morning, Brent. How are you?" And I just walked right past you. My mind was set on things. And so, absolutely, I can be better at that. But it takes a friend, doing a little passive-aggressive feedback there. It's like, oh, wow, my people skills today were not very good. And so I know a lot of things, and so you have to, one, learn a lot of things, but then get some great feedback and just keep working on them. And don't get discouraged, and don't follow the thing like, that's just me. I'm just not a people person. And I think a lot of us will do that. I'm just not a people person. You just got to live with it, right? That's a horrible excuse. That's a lazy excuse to just say that I'm not capable of being a people person just because it's not my tendency to do it. And so don't put up with that. I think as leaders, we can even call out our people on that. And it's like, and we can do it in an encouraging way. It's like, I really think you have it in you to be a great people person. And I want to work with you on that. Will you work with me on that? And I think for the most part, people will step up into that and grow into that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Brent, once again, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks.
It's always a pleasure.
I love it.
That's good stuff.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.